Hi Rupert, it's James.
Hi there. Hi, James.
It's just a quick question. When you're doing seated meditation, do you have many thoughts? And is that
when I'm doing a meditation,
yeah.
Do I have thoughts?
Do you have many thoughts come in, or is it just like pure awareness? And would that be a goal of my ego to get rid of thoughts?
No. In this approach, in the traditional, many traditional spiritual practices, thought is considered something to be something to be got rid of, to be denied. It's not here. We don't have that approach to thinking. I love thinking. I think thinking's a beautiful tool, a beautiful activity. No, it's not. This is not a way of. This is not a way of discipline, practice, effort, suppression. It's a way of understanding, a way of recognition. And our thoughts and feelings, and in time our activities and relationships will all change as our understanding changes. So here the controlling or disciplining or stilling of our thoughts is not a goal. Our thoughts will change as a result of this understanding, but that's a byproduct of this understanding. It's not the goal of this understanding. The goal of this understanding is first to recognize our true nature, recognize the nature of reality, and then to express and celebrate and share that in the world, in our activities and relationships. So do I have thoughts when I'm guiding a meditation like this afternoon? Yes, I start thinking, okay, there are lots of new faces here, many people that I don't know. Some of you may have been studying these matters for 40 years. Some of you may have come across non-duality on YouTube 2 weeks ago. I've no idea. The ones of you that I don't know, and there are lots of you here this week that I don't know. So I think, okay, this is a group of people that I don't know. So I'm going to start right at the very beginning. That's as much preparation as I do. I'm just going to start at the beginning and go very slowly. Very slowly, very careful to define my terms. Try not to use a term like awareness or consciousness before, without making it very clear experientially what I mean by it. So I just go very slowly, step by step. And yes, in that process, thoughts come to me. I'm basically speaking my thoughts as they come to me. And if no thoughts come to me, I pause. And sometimes we sit in silence for 10 minutes. Either because no thoughts come to me, or because, more importantly, because I want you to explore your own experience. I don't want you to listen to me. Really, meditation takes place in between my words. So the less I speak, the more opportunity you have to explore your own experience. So particularly as the week goes on, I hope my words, at least in the meditations, will get less and less and less, and there'll be more and more space in between for you to explore your own experience. But yes, thoughts come to me in meditation, yes, and I have no agenda with them, no desire to control them or stop them.
And is that awareness having those thoughts, or is it always a separate self?
Don't forget, the separate self is just an imaginary limitation of awareness. Awareness is the only self, if we can call it a self, or being there is. What we essentially are is awareness. The separate self is an imaginary limitation of that awareness. King Lear is an imaginary limitation of John Smith. There aren't two people, one person called John Smith, and another person called King Lear. There's just one person, John Smith, and King Lear is an apparent or an imaginary limitation of John Smith. There isn't one person called Mary who falls asleep in Froyle, and another person called Jane who walks on the streets of Paris. Jane is just an imaginary limitation of Mary's mind. So there isn't awareness and a separate self or ego. There's just awareness, which is universal and unlimited, plus thoughts and feelings, which makes it seem as if awareness is limited. That's what each of us is, an apparently limited self. So there is just being. And being without anything added to it is universal and unlimited. That is God's being. There is just God's being. But when God's being clothes itself in thoughts and perceptions, it seems to become a human being. God's being clothes itself in human experience, a layer of thinking, a layer of feeling, a layer of sensing, a layer of perceiving. God's being, infinite being, seems to become a human being. In the ultimate analysis, there are no independent, individual beings or selves. There is just one being, one universal being, from which everyone and everything derives its apparently independent existence. So ultimately, in the ultimate analysis, there aren't even human beings. There is being clothed in human experience. The separate self, or the ego, is infinite being clothed in limited experience. And this mixture of infinite being or infinite consciousness plus human experience makes for this amalgam, an apparently separate self. But there's no real separate self. There's no real character called King Lear. That's why in this approach we don't spend a lot of time trying to get rid of the separate self, or trying to kill the separate self, or trying to discipline the separate self. That would be like trying to discipline King Lear, but there is no person called King Lear. We're more interested in John Smith than King Lear. We're more interested here in who we are. We're not really interested in who we're not. So that's what I mean when I say a path of discipline, effort, practice. That would be the path of the separate self. This is a way of understanding, a way of recognizing, it's the way of recognizing who we are, not disciplining who we are not. And for some of you that have come from other traditions that are very strong on practice, and I say this with no disrespect to there's any other tradition, the Zen tradition or the Buddhist or the Christian, these are all beautiful traditions. I don't mean to criticize them or disrespect them. They all have their place, but it's a different approach. What we do here is sometimes called the direct path, by which I mean we go directly to our true nature of pure being or pure awareness. We don't spend time disciplining the mind and the body. There are other approaches that discipline the mind and the body. And as I say, I don't mean to criticize those approaches. They're valid. But it's not what we do here. So particularly those of you that have come from one of these traditions that are very strong on practice and effort and discipline, just at least for these 5 days, put that practice on one side. You can always go back to it. And just consider this very direct approach, the way of recognition or the way of understanding. All those traditional approaches, in fact, end with this direct approach. But in those traditions, it is the disciplining of the mind and the body is seen as a prerequisite to this direct recognition of our true nature. So you spend 20 years purifying the mind and the body until the mind is considered to be sufficiently mature to turn inward on itself and relax back into its source, pure consciousness. In this approach, the disciplining of the mind and the body is not considered a prerequisite to the recognition of our true nature. In this approach, irrespective of the content of the mind and the body, anybody is considered sufficiently able to go directly to their true nature, simply by virtue of the fact that everyone is aware. Being aware is present in everybody's experience, and therefore everybody can go directly to the experience of being aware without having to still the mind or discipline the body, or you go directly to the experience of being aware. First of all, we have glimpses of it, and we stabilize in that experience, and then we return to our objective experience and try to realign it with this understanding. So in this approach, any changes that take place in the mind and the body tend to come after the recognition of our true nature. They're not considered a prerequisite for it. That's the difference between this very direct approach and the traditional progressive paths.